From the 1st century BCE to the 7th century CE, two superpowers stood at opposite ends of the known world: the Roman Empire in the west, and the Persian empires of the east, first under the Parthians and later the Sassanids. Their rivalry would span more than 7 centuries, would shape the political map, economic roots, and cultural exchanges of Eurasia. But why did Rome hate Persia so much? You might have heard about Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who conquered Persia in 330 BC, but afterwards his empire fragmented into several successor states, one of which was the Kingdom of Parthia, situated in what is today Iran. The Parthians soon rose to prominence due to their mastery of mounted archery. They used lightly armored horsemen who could gallop across the Eurasian steppes with ease, raining down arrows on their foes. When Alexander's empire splintered, this kingdom flourished. By the 3rd century BC, they controlled much of Mesopotamia, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. The Parthians were led by a dynasty of warrior kings who preferred riding horses to wearing golden crowns. While their society emphasized equestrian skills and combat prowess, Rome was locked in a deadly embrace with a formidable foe. And this wasn't any ordinary opponent. This was a clash of titans between two civilizations at the zenith of their power, each vying for supremacy over the known world. In 53 BCE, Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's most powerful men, marched into Parthian territory, seeking glory and wealth. He hoped to conquer Mesopotamia, a region coveted by Rome for its wealth and strategic importance. Crassus led an army of approximately 10,000 Roman legionaries, the elite soldiers of Rome who had brought the Mediterranean world under Roman rule. But he grossly underestimated the Parthian army. Under King Orodes II, the Parthians employed guerrilla tactics and exploited the Romans' unfamiliarity with the terrain. At the Battle of Carrhae, the Romans found themselves ensnared in a Parthian trap. Cavalry archers swarmed the Roman infantry, their arrows raining down like a deadly hailstorm. The Romans, heavily reliant on formation and discipline, struggled against the swift and elusive Parthians. Within hours, thousands of Roman soldiers were dead, captured, or scattered. Crassus himself met a grim end. According to legend, molten gold was poured down his throat, a cruel symbol of his insatiable greed. The Battle of Carrhae became a humiliating defeat in Roman memory, overshadowed only by the later destruction of Crassus's legion. To add insult to injury, the Parthians paraded Roman eagles and standards through the streets of their captured cities, stark reminder of Rome's impotence. The news of the disaster sent shockwaves back to Rome, shattering any hopes of quick conquest. In response to this stinging defeat, Rome spent the next 5 decades preparing for revenge. The Romans realized they couldn't win a war of attrition in the arid east without water, so they established a supply line from the Persian Gulf to Syria to ensure continuous water for their troops. Finally, in 40 BCE, Gaius Cassius Longinus led an invasion force to the east. He achieved some victories, but overall the campaign failed. As the Roman Republic teetered on the brink of civil war, the Parthians seized the opportunity. Orodes' successor, Phraates III, advanced deep into Roman Syria. He pillaged Roman cities and even threatened to march on Rome itself. But Caesar Augustus eventually restored order. He brokered a peace deal with Phraates, establishing a buffer zone in Mesopotamia. Throughout the 1st century CE, the Romans and Parthians mostly kept the peace. Trade flourished along the Silk Road, connecting the riches of the East with the markets of Rome. But as the 2nd century wore on, tensions flared once more. In 161 CE, the Parthian king Vologases IV sought to expand his empire beyond Mesopotamia. He invaded Armenia, a kingdom situated at the crossroads of East and West, coveted by both Rome and Parthia for its strategic value. Rome viewed any Parthian advance as a threat to its eastern frontiers. And when Vologases seized control of Armenia, Rome saw it as a challenge to its own sphere of influence. Emperor Antoninus Pius responded by dispatching legions into Armenia to restore the balance of power. The Roman general Avidius Cassius campaigned successfully against the Parthians, pushing them back from Armenian soil. This victory was a significant one for Rome, marking a clear assertion of Roman dominance in the region. But as quickly as it began, the conflict ended. Vologases died, and his successors proved less belligerent. A fragile peace settled over the Near East for a time, interrupted only by border skirmishes and diplomatic disputes. Yet as the 3rd century CE approached, a new Persian dynasty arose, the Sassanids, and with them, a new chapter of conflict with Rome. The Sassanid kings viewed the Roman Empire as a fading giant, ripe for conquest. Shapur I, a warrior king, inherited a realm in decline. But during his reign, the Sassanid army grew, becoming one of the largest fighting forces in the ancient world. By the year 260 CE, Shapur was ready for war. He invaded Roman Mesopotamia, defeating and capturing the Roman Emperor Valerian. This humiliation seared into the Roman psyche, fueling decades of retaliation. Yet despite this victory, the war dragged on. Over the next few decades, there would be confrontations like the Battle of Edessa, where Rome's Queen Zenobia showcased her military brilliance, repelling the Sassanid onslaught. For all their military might, the Sassanids were unable to deliver a knockout blow to Rome. The borders shifted, cities were sacked, and treaties were signed. But no side could claim total victory. The Romans valiantly defended their eastern frontiers, inflicting heavy losses on the Sassanids. The Emperor Aurelian, for instance, inflicted a crushing defeat on Shapur I near the city of Risafa. This victory, along with the peace treaty that followed, secured Rome's eastern borders for a time. But the conflict between Rome and Persia wasn't solely a military struggle. It was also an economic war for the riches of the ancient world. Control over trade routes, particularly the Silk Road, was the beating heart of their conflict. Whoever dominated Mesopotamia controlled the flow of silk, spices, and precious metals between East and West. This competition wasn't limited to the battlefield. Both empires engaged in diplomacy, forming alliances with local kingdoms and tribes to counter their rivals' influence. Moreover, each side attempted to outmaneuver the other through a combination of military strength, strategic marriages, and shrewd diplomacy. For example, in 298 CE, Diocletian divided the empire into 2 halves, appointing his son as conqueror in the east. This move aimed not only at sharing the burden of ruling such a vast empire, but also at securing the eastern frontier. Similarly, the Sassanids made efforts to extend their influence beyond Persia, even managing to conquer parts of Central Asia. As the centuries passed, the rivalry between Rome and Persia shaped the course of history. It influenced military strategy, trade patterns, and even the exchange of technology and culture. In the late 3rd century, when King Shapur I rebuilt the city of Persepolis, he infused it with Roman architectural elements, reflecting both the cosmopolitan nature of his court and the influence of his defeated enemy. Meanwhile, Roman engineers studied Sassanid fortifications, adapting their techniques to strengthen Roman defenses. Likewise, as merchants traveled along the Silk Road, they didn't just exchange goods, but also ideas and technologies. The spread of Buddhism from India to the Roman Empire, for instance, owes much to this network. However, as the 7th century approached, the titanic struggle between Rome and Persia began to fade. Both empires, exhausted by centuries of fighting, were vulnerable to a new rising power, the Islamic Caliphate. Emerging from the Arabian Peninsula, the Caliphate swept aside the Sassanids entirely, seizing vast Roman territories in the east. In 637 CE, the Muslim general Khalid ibn al-Walid crushed the Sassanid army at the Battle of the Roman Bridge, opening the gates to Mesopotamia. By 640 CE, he had advanced as far west as Syria, completing the conquest of Persian lands. Thus, the 7th century marked a turning point in history. What had begun as a struggle between 2 superpowers ended with both succumbing to a common foe. Rome and Persia had battled for 7 centuries, shaping the geopolitics of the ancient world and leaving behind ruins, chronicles, and legends that continue to resonate through history. Their rivalry was one of the most consequential in history, defining the geopolitics of the ancient world and influencing civilizations for centuries. Theirs was not merely a clash of armies, but a contest of cultures, a struggle for supremacy, and a testament to the human spirit's indomitable will to power.